Welcome to this week's Founder Focus segment, where we dive into the inside stories behind some of the most impressive entrepreneurial journeys. Founder Focus takes us on an intimate conversation with innovators and entrepreneurs and the great companies they've built. This is Steve Greenfield from Automotive Ventures, and thank you for joining us. This week, I'm excited to welcome our guest, Dennis McGinn, who has an incredible story to share. Dennis has led several companies in his career, both public and private, along with running several business units at Hewlett-Packard. He also was the CEO of a vehicle tracking and activities analytics company. Recognizing the need for vehicle accountability on the lot and in reconditioning, he created RapidRecon back in 2010. Today, RapidRecon is the industry standard in reconditioning workflow communications, transparency, and accountability. Dennis also spent 21 years at Hewlett-Packard applying the principles of continuous process improvement to advanced manufacturing software for major automotive OEMs. CPI is a core key performance indicator within RapidRecon's workflow technology. Dennis has authored how-to books including Recon T2L and Inventory as a Waste, providing auto retailers and their vendors foundational insights into the economics and opportunities available to those who practice time-to-line reconditioning workflow principles. Today, we're going to peel back the layers a bit to understand what motivates Dennis, how he thinks about innovation and motivation, and how he built his business. So with that, let's welcome Dennis to the show. Dennis, how you doing?
Great. Really happy to be here. Thank you for your invitation.
Well, it's great. I'm glad that we're socially distancing here and doing this in person in the studio. And you flew in for this interview, so I really appreciate that.
Yes, I did. I love what CBT does, and when I saw that you had a program here and you invited me, I was thrilled. So thank you.
All right, great. Well, let's dive right in. Let's tell us a little bit about RapidRecon, if you don't mind.
Sure. RapidRecon is an interesting story that really blends my background at HP and what I discovered when somebody, actually a Lexus dealer that I knew, said, hey, there's this big problem with reconditioning. Everybody makes up a number so they don't have to feel bad. It's all a kind of a self-fulfilling failure situation because nobody knows they don't have the real numbers. There's no real accountability. And so I thought about that for a while, and having been through a lot of different kind of workflow processes, like all the things that give us these gadgets we have today, these phones and computational devices and things, I was there as those companies went through the various stages of technology to make that happen. And it would never have happened if it looked like what the reconditioning process was, because without all that accountability, you'd never be able to get there. So I thought, I can probably do something about this. So let me dive in here and figure it out. So, and so we went through a couple of stages, but the first thing was we had to give the people, the technicians to start with, a way to manage their own accountability. Because when it was about, okay, somebody's going to ask me how did I do, they don't want any bad news because they're going to go tell a general manager who's going to go to the 20 group meeting, and they're going to share information, and we don't want to make that a bad thing. So we'll just kind of bring up the best case we can remember, and we'll just keep doing that. Problem was that after doing this now for 10 years and doing thousands of dealerships and so on, the difference between what they were saying to make it a non-issue and the real number was many turns. So they would say, we're 2 or 3 days, it's not a problem, don't bother me, I don't want to talk about it because don't bother. And the best we've ever seen in a starting point is closer to 15 days when you include all the cars, you include everything, which they all count. I mean, they're all part of this, the assets that you have that you're trying to turn. So once I got in there and I really started to see what was going on, the light bulbs started to go off a lot. And the first step was to produce an app. And at this point, just the managers had iPhones. So it was just kind of getting started. So we had to start with basic phones and desktops and be able that the techs and the people in the store had access to, that they could see what work they had that was in their bucket, and they could say, here's what I did to this, and then they would push a button and it would shoot it off to the person approving the work, which was the next big thing. And instead of them having to take a repair order and run around and find the used car manager or somebody to sign off on this thing, who is usually too busy to respond, they were in the tower working deals, this would hit their phone and say, okay, this car's on the rack. If you don't approve it now, it's going to go to the back of the line. So that part of the accountability, giving the individual something they could see and say, I'm done, and everybody knows the car's done, it's ready for the next step, next bucket, and the approver is right there visible in the loop. That was the first big movement forward with creating transparency in that whole system. And we started to early on use average days in recon as a metric, as a key performance indicator. And we calculated that and we put it up on the screen, whether it was on a desktop or on your phone, so everybody could see the number they were all responsible for collectively, from start of reconditioning to the car being frontline ready, being sale ready. So there wasn't any place anymore to kind of bury things, because it was all there, it was all in the averages. And it took a little while. Some people jumped all over it. I mean, some of the more advanced general managers and groups said, oh, okay, I really get this. I understand the economics of this, so this makes a lot of sense to me. So help us get there. Help us get this started.
That's great. Let's rewind to, you decided to make the jump into entrepreneurship at some point. You had a successful career. Sounds like a couple of careers. You were doing very well. How do you know it was the right time to jump into being an entrepreneur?
What I knew was probably when I did my own little pivot from the company before RapidRecon, which had to do with managing lot location and key control. But I now had my head in the retail space instead of things I had done in the OEM space before at HP and so on, and the whole retail thing became really a whole different focus for me. I really got my head into this. How are we going to help and move this ball along in that area? So I probably had entrepreneurial stuff in me all along, didn't really think of myself that way. I'm in Silicon Valley, where there are a lot of pretty obvious entrepreneurs. And I never really thought of myself as one of them. But when I got into this space and realized that these processes that I had learned, this continuous improvement stuff, which really a lot of it came from Deming post-World War II, Honda and Toyota, and that kind of the continuous process improvement, total quality control, all that. We spent years at HP learning how to do that and how to apply it. Well, I was able to bring that background and that experience into this problem, and the way it manifested itself was, okay, so we can give people access so they know what they're supposed to do and they can manage their own accountability. And that's a good start. But now all of a sudden you've got people looking at a number saying, yeah, I know my part of that. I know my part, and it's not good enough. So we have to continually work on that because it's shared. And instead of them getting together every Monday and putting on a board and saying, well, what do we do better this week, or what do we do last week? Part of the expectation with all the people that are involved with that is everybody's got an opportunity to contribute to improving that process. Well, that's what happened in Japan. Right? The culture was there to support that too, which was marvelous because the timing and all that was great. But that's really an important aspect of this, is the individuals that used to want to not be accountable. Don't point your finger at me because I know you can't prove it. So let's just keep going on and I'll go back and do my job. Was, now not only am I part of that number, but I'm part of the continuous improvement of that number,
Right.
which is a whole different fulfillment in your role.
Right.
And those are the people you want. You want the people that say, oh yeah, look, here's something we can do better, and have that be part of the total effort. You can't do that if you can't, like, measure and manage. You can't do that if you don't measure it.
Right.
And you can't manage what you don't measure.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So I brought that little bit in to this piece, wrote about it, and now people, I think, are starting to.
That's great. How about mentors? Who has been the most important mentor in your life, and what specifically did you learn from them?
I would probably include Dale Pollock in that group, because I actually knew him before he started Empower, and when I decided I was going to go down this reconditioning track, I actually talked to Dale and a number of other people and said, "Is this a real problem?" And he said, "Yeah, it really is." And so I still talk to him about that. He gives me hints of things he would do if he were me. So he's probably the most influential because of what he accomplished, in terms of thinking about inventory turns and getting after the used car business, and what he really brought. He really changed the whole industry, I think, just because of how well he understood it, and how he approached it, and how dogged he was about getting people after that part of making decisions. So I would say he's probably probably my number one on my list of people I've taken ideas from, watched as what he's done.
What's the hardest thing you've had to do as an entrepreneur?
To build a company without anybody else's money. Okay, so in previous companies, I had worked with venture groups and things to look at what could be done with risk management and banks and insurance companies, and working with very big companies, Chase and AIG and Barclays and people like that. So when I started this company, I said, okay, I'm not going to build a Silicon Valley kind of company. I'm not going to bring in any outside money, because I really don't share. I don't really want a board per se, because I don't share that process very well, because I'm so used to making decisions and moving on, which is really the reason I left HP. There were too many meetings going on. So, I think that was it. It was, okay, I'm not going to be managing somebody else's money. I don't want anybody that's say they have to be here to help me figure out what to do next. So that was probably the biggest part was, okay, I'm just going to do this. And it drove me to make the connections, to get it started, to get the first pieces in place, to do it without having a bunch of other people's money.
That's great. So a flip side of that, what's been the highlight of your entrepreneurial path so far?
Well, other than this interview, I think probably the highlight has been that I've been on my soapbox now for a few years, and actually some of it started here with CBT, who I respect, Jim and Bridget, and what they've done for the industry. And I guess and then I've written the two books that you mentioned, and I didn't really do that to get a lot of visibility. Those books are mostly full of interviews with customers about what they did. I just kind of put a little stuff around it. But I think the thing that makes me feel the best is people are listening. Okay, they're getting after this thing. I'm not talking into a dark hole anymore, and so more groups and more of the managers and dealerships are getting going with this. They're seeing the whole picture. Now, granted that these guys are really busy. I mean, a general manager has an impossible job anyway, right? Managing 5 or 6 different P&Ls and things like that. So this becomes something that they would like to watch. Some of them hands-on, and then they have their teams, fixed ops and used car and operations. But the groups are getting smarter about this, and they're actually putting a person in to help the stores get to these points. And that's had a major impact. So that's something I've pushed for quite a while. at the group levels that you need somebody that is your own internal person for improving your performance. We just did this with one of Penske's new operations and things, and it works really well.
So there'll be a lot of entrepreneurs dialing in today, or wannabe entrepreneurs that may be ready to make a jump. Best advice you could give them?
I would say for people that are considering that, make sure you've got somebody you're talking to bounce things around with you, because as you bang into various walls and you make decisions that are going to make a difference as to how fast you get someplace. So I jumped in and helped with some people, and those people that are looking at, hey, can I go do something like this? They should make sure that they're connected to people in the industry that are helping them figure out, is this the right way to go? And I don't include money sources in that, because most of those, unless it's friends and family and things like that, I think are usually venture organizations and things like that. There are some of them that are really good, and there's some of them that they're just there to see if they can make more money on their money.
Sure.
And there's a lot of that around. I mean, the rush right now for outside investors to bring money into this industry has never been hotter.
Right.
It's just all over the place.
So true. Well, Dennis, thanks for making time today, and thanks for flying in for this interview, and really appreciate you imparting wisdom on other entrepreneurs that are out there.
Well, thank you for your invitation, and I appreciate the opportunity.
That's great. Thanks, Dennis. So that's it for this week's Founder Focus, our dive into the inside stories behind some of the most impressive entrepreneurial journeys. Please feel free to contact me anytime. I look forward to catching up to discuss the industry with you. Thanks for tuning in to this week's Founder Focus, and we'll see you next week.